Drawing plans. A woman. Fulgrim cackled. The Emperor returns to the mortal realm, and he chooses the form of a woman. Magnus watched in silence as his brother laughed. The Emperor's return was a serious topic, no matter what form he took, and to see his fellow Primarch brush it off so easily. Then again, Fulgrim has not always been the most sound of mind. I take it you find something quite amusing, brother. Magnus turned slightly as Lorgar stepped from the shadows, flanked by two Chaos Lords he assumed were the word-bearers, more senior officers. Oh, most definitely, Lorgar, the Daemon Primarch said, slithering towards the new arrival. The Emperor has finally revealed himself, and as a woman of all things. And here I thought your warnings of a great struggle actually meant something. Fulgrim chuckled again, but mirth turned to shock as Lorgar delivered a quick backhand to his brother's face. Even Magnus was surprised, watching with trepidation as the two others faced off against one another. You dare to strike me? Fulgrim hissed. Is it better than underestimating the power of the Emperor, brother? Lorgar retorted, brushing past Fulgrim as he approached Magnus. Fulgrim seethed behind the other Primarch, but made no motion to attack, yet. And you, Magnus, you seem fairly composed for this turn of events. When you told me that the Emperor would be returning, I prepared as best as I could. Magnus said. It matters not if the Emperor is male or female, all that matters is that he stands prepared to strike against the galaxy. And that is where we shall lay our trap, dear brothers. Lorgar stepped away for a moment, raising his hand towards the sky. There was a pause before a shimmering image of the galaxy spread before them, thousands of stars and planets bringing light once more to a dead world. The Emperor is still on Terra, and will remain there for some time as she gathers her power. And would you have us wait again, like cowards? Fulgrim asked, some of his composure having returned. I am still waiting for this grand demonstration of your power, Lorgar, and I cannot say my patience has grown since last we spoke. It is being arranged, as we speak. Lorgar twisted his hand, drawing the map towards galactic south. The Great Devourer advances from the east and south. Already my agents have arranged so that the hive fleets will strike against the Sons of Nocturne. Even with subtle guidance, Magnus said. It will take some time for the hive fleets to move into a suitable attacking position. The Emperor and her lapdogs could be well prepared before the Tyranids attack. Oh, I have taken that possibility into mind, brother. Lorgar turned to another section of the map. Greenskins make for such a wonderful pawn, do they not? Magnus approached the section of the map Lorgar had indicated. A simple tool, true, but though they severely lacked in many regards, the Loyalists were well adept at battling and killing greenskins. It would not take the Emperor long to clear out an Orc empire, especially if she had Corax at her side. Corax. Clever, brother, Magnus said after a moment. Draw the Emperor and Corax closer to the Tyranids by threatening both the Salamanders and the Raven Guard's home worlds. At least now we know where her first strikes shall be. Too simplistic, Fulgrim muttered. What is your true plan, Lorgar? The Tyranids, my dear Fulgrim, will show you that what I speak is the truth. Lorgar dismissed the illusion before turning towards his fellows. But think, now, with the hive mind dealt with, will we not be free to take the galaxy for ourselves? Fulgrim, you could send your forces straight to Macrage and Savage Gilliman's bastards before they could realize who they faced. And Magnus, Lorgar turned back. Your next campaign against Fenris could have myself, Mortarion, Angron, and Perturabo assisting, to ensure that the wolves of Fenris are finally put down. If you mean to have the Emperor kill the hive mind, then perhaps I might be more convinced. Magnus said. In due time, brother. Lorgar turned again, so he could face both of his brothers. There is more that I must do to ensure that the Emperor arrives exactly when and where we need her to be. As Master of the Thousand Suns, surely you must be familiar with such matters. Magnus said nothing. Though he was not as expressive in his anger as Fulgrim or Angron, Lorgar still had a fine line to tread before he went too far. Of course, we would have to deal with more of your schemes. Fulgrim moved to leave. Perhaps I might lure Angron back to his senses, it appears to be something I am better suited for than you two. Magnus watched as Fulgrim departed. Amusing as it would be to watch the two Primarches battle, there were more important matters to deal with. Keeping an eye on the Emperor, for one, would be troublesome enough. A moment, Magnus, Lorgar said as Magnus prepared to return to his world. I know that I have not been forthcoming in what is awaiting us, but you must understand that this is a most delicate operation. I would leave delicacies to Fulgrim. Magnus looked to Lorgar. He is the one you should be trying to convince, not me. Forget about Fulgrim for a moment, he can be convinced by mere parlor tricks and smooth words. How else did he find himself trapped by a mere daemon? Lorgar smirked. No, here I have come to ask you about something more, obscure, shall we say. Magnus raised his eyebrow at this, watching in silence as the shadows seemed to twist around Lorgar. Do you know the true nature of the warp, brother? Most gracious and holy Empress, protector of mankind and guardian of Terra, Naomi and her sisters chanted, hands clasped as they kneeled before the small altar in their room. We thank you, our most gracious and holy lady, for your continued guidance as we stand against those that would see our great works undone. We thank you for health in body and mind, Rebecca said. Though it is not by our strength alone that we stand. It is by your will, your desire, that we hold against the night, said Veronica. We ask you now, to guide us as we embark upon the greatest mission that any of us shall face in our lifetimes, Ruth added. Let us seek out and destroy those who would threaten your student, Lady Terra, Judith said. Though we ourselves may perish, let them burn in the fires of your wrath, that they may never rise again to threaten her or any of mankind. Answer us now, O Empress, that we may receive your guidance. Naomi finished, the sisters reaching to the rosary that hung around their necks. There is only the Empress. And she is our shield and protector. The other four finished, rising after a brief moment of silence. Twilight had watched the whole prayer session, observing every word and motion that the sisters had performed during the ritual. Maybe someday she would feel comfortable enough to join them, but that day seemed a ways off. Well, I hope that gave you a glimpse into how the Order of Our Martyred Lady conducts prayer sessions. Sister Naomi said as she moved to retrieve her weapons from where they rested. Oh, most definitely, Twilight replied. Though, since the Empress has returned, couldn't you just ask her directly for a blessing? I tried that once, Judith said. The custodes got mad at me, I think. It's hard to tell behind those masks. It would be improper for us to intrude in such a matter, Lady Terra. Sister Naomi continued. She has her duties and the Imperium to watch over, we are but humble sisters doing whatever we can to ensure there is still an Imperium to protect. She really isn't that hard to talk to. Twilight countered. I've been her student for most of my life, she really does like to talk to people and do what she can to help them. But you are her student, we are not. Your continued exposure to her presence may have clouded some of your judgment. There was a pause before Naomi backtracked. No offense, Lady Terra. None taken. Twilight rose, moving towards the door as the sisters formed up alongside her. Well, I can always talk with her. Perhaps she'll listen to me and give you all a private audience. All of the sisters brightened at this idea, even Naomi lost some of her stern demeanor at the thought. The moment was fleeting, though, the sisters returning to formation as they followed Twilight out into the hall. The palace seemed more lively since Celestia's declaration of a new crusade. Those that worked to keep the palace running were more energetic in their actions, more pilgrims had arrived to witness the Empress triumph, even the custodes were more alert to their surroundings if that was at all possible. Twilight still kept her focus forward, with the important work she and the others would be doing, she needed to make sure she was not too distracted. You're late. Twilight gave a small yelp as Corax stepped from the shadows of a nearby hallway, the Primarch towering over her as he approached. Why do you always do that? Twilight snapped, trying to regain some of her previous composure. Force of habit, I suppose. Corax replied. Twilight said nothing more as she continued towards the war room, Corax at her side while the sisters backed up to give the Primarch more room. Just as well, I am certain the Empress would be quite worried if her favored student were not properly taken care of. Oh, but the sisters have watched over me just fine, Twilight replied, looking back to Naomi and her squad. Veronica and Judith gave Twilight quick smiles, smiles that vanished as Corax cast a glance at them. I'm sure they can protect me from anything really dangerous. Let us hope, for your sake, that your confidence is not misplaced. There was a pause before Corax continued. What do you know of war, Terra? Twilight fell silent as she thought of the best way to answer Corax. The changeling attack was perhaps the closest she had been to a real war, but what was that compared to the 15,000 years of experience that Corax had? Twilight started. I suppose I know a little. Corax stopped walking, turning slightly so he faced Twilight. Look into my eyes, Terra. Twilight hesitated, but complied, even if she could feel her eyes straining as she met Corax's gaze. You are a kind woman, Terra, you are slow to anger, and you understand the hearts and minds of those you reach out to. But, you have lived a sheltered life, tucked away among books and tales. Venturing this far is more than you have ever done before, but you are uncertain that you know the way. Twilight quivered, finally breaking away from Corax's sight. It isn't really all like that, is it? She whimpered. It is your life, you know more about it than I do. Corax replied. I do not wish to frighten you, Terra, but I also do not wish to see you broken by all that might come. I have seen too many good people broken into nothingness, and I do not wish for you to be among them. Corax continued on, though Twilight was hesitant to follow after him. She flinched slightly as she felt a hand on her shoulder. We are here to protect you, Lady Terra, Sister Naomi said, giving Twilight a small smile underneath her helmet. As you helped me in my darkest hour, so I shall be there to help you. Thank you. Twilight said, giving Naomi a smile in return before she turned to hurry after Corax. Ahead, the hallway ended in a darkened room, with only a few figures drifting about an illuminated table. Twilight, Corax, and the sisters filed in, Twilight stopping only to allow her eyes to adjust to the change in light as the doors were closed behind her. The table was a massive map of the galaxy, small images depicting fleets and army groups flickering across the map. She could not get a perfect view of the image, but perhaps Celestia could see from where she was seated. Of course she could. She was the Empress. I am glad you could join us, Terra, Celestia said, rising in her seat slightly. Now, we can begin planning the Second Crusade. Empress, one man stepped forward, an official-looking fellow Twilight guessed was a general of some sort. Your call has been answered by several regiments, numbering close to 2 million guardsmen and perhaps half their number in tanks, artillery platforms, and aircraft. And the Asteroids. The phalanx is at your disposal, my Empress, the Imperial Fist Marine said. My brothers are scattered about the galaxy, but we have 400 Marines ready for combat at your command. And the Minotaurs will provide our battle fleet for your use as well, another Space Marine said, though Twilight noted he seemed more grumpy than the other. 1,400 Asteroids and 2 million guardsmen, Celestia mused. It is a start, I suppose. What of the fleet? Battle Fleet Solar has some ships that can be spared for the crusade, Empress, yet another man said. Though even with the Mechanicum's shipyards working at full capacity it will be some time before we can replace any ships that might be lost. Then we shall choose our initial targets carefully. Celestia turned her attention towards the map. Tell me, Corax, where would you have us strike first? There was a pause, Twilight watching as Corax leaned forward to examine the map. His gaze danced across the images, tracking fleets and armies as they shifted positions. The Eye of Terror, perhaps, could be a tempting target, he said. Chaos has receded, and there is always the possibility of finding those who may be lost but uncorrupted. The resources of Kadaya as well could be useful if we were to incorporate it into our forces sooner rather than later. A fair choice. But our force is small, untested. We will need a more ready target to prove that we can carry this campaign to a full crusade of liberation. Corax turned his head slightly. The greenskin hordes of the south should be effective in tempering our men in battle. Also fair. Celestia leaned back. And it would play well to my future plans, as I plan to restore you and those of your brothers who still remain. I had intended to move to Ultramar as soon as possible. With all due respect, Empress, the Imperial Fist started. I am not sure if the Ultramarines are exactly prepared to undertake any major campaigns for the foreseeable future. Why? The schism. There are those among the Ultramarines who have grown weary, especially when working alongside some of their own number. Twilight watched as Celestia's face darkened, her free hand tightening ever so slightly. The others in the room looked to one another, nervous energy spreading like a fire. It would have been better had you told me of this sooner, she growled. I will address this, but that will have to wait, for now. Celestia's face lightened somewhat as she continued. Moving south will perhaps be our best option. It will allow our armies to battle against some, lesser foes, and we will be able to gain the help of several first founding chapters to bolster our ranks. It will also draw us closer to some of the tendrils of the Tyranid hive fleets, the first man said. Breaking them might stall the crusade before we can accomplish our goal of retaking the galaxy. Do you not have faith? Celestia asked. The room fell silent for a moment before she continued. Do you not have faith that I am strong enough to stand against the Tyranids? Do you truly believe that we may be undone by them, and that our light will be extinguished among millions of chitinous bodies? Of course not, Empress, the man said quickly. Forgive me for my lack of faith. You are forgiven. Celestia turned next to Korux. You, Korux, may also take this time to reconnect with the Raven Guard. I am sure you would be more effective with your sons at your side. I'm sure, Korux said, falling silent for several moments. It remains to be seen, though, if they would be so willing to accept me as their leader once more. Give it time, my friend, I am sure they will come around. Celestia rose to her feet. Send word to your commanders, your brothers at arms, I want our forces ready to move by the end of the month, once a suitable target has been chosen. Of course, Empress, the Imperial Fist said. I promise you, we shall not leave you wanting. I am sure. You are all dismissed. Those present prepared to leave before Celestia spoke again. Terra, a moment, please. Twilight stopped, looking towards where the sisters stood waiting. They gave a small nod before departing, taking a position outside the doors as they closed, leaving Celestia and Twilight alone once more. Twilight turned towards her mentor. Is something wrong, Princess? Many things, but they do not matter now. Celestia said, crossing the room to stand before Twilight. I wish to know if you are prepared for what you are to face. Korux asked me that earlier, Twilight started. He didn't seem very confident in my abilities. It is a lot I'm asking of you, Twilight. Celestia kneeled so she could be on eye level with Twilight. I have done all I can to protect you, Twilight, and soon that shall be put to the test. This is a dangerous galaxy, and I may not always be there to keep an eye on you. But I have the sisters and Mashas and his followers. True, but even they may not be enough. Celestia gave a small sigh. I do not wish to discourage you, Twilight, but I do ask that you prepare yourself for what you might see. You will see many terrible and powerful things, your friends and allies forced into actions that you never thought possible of them. I may not be the same person you think I am. Twilight said nothing, wringing her hands slightly as she thought the right thing to say. You brought me here to help you, Princess, she said finally. I'm not giving up on that. There was a pause before Celestia smiled and rose back on her feet. That will do, Twilight, she said. Come, we have work to do. Twilight nodded, following after Celestia as she exited the war room. The sisters and Korux were waiting outside, Naomi's squad forming up behind Twilight once more while Korux moved to speak with Celestia. You will see many terrible and powerful things, your friends and allies forced into actions that you never thought possible of them. The Imperium was harsh, but it had its limits. Even then, they still had a ways to travel before they would be thrust into a true war. Twilight chewed her lip. She would be prepared, the fate of the galaxy depended on that.